Protect your wooden clarinet and get the most out of your reeds with Boveda two-way humidity control packs. Watch until the end of this video to learn more. Then head to bovedainc.com and use code Clarineat at checkout to save 10% on your next purchase of Boveda products. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Clarineat podcast. I'm your host, Sean Perrin, and we're here today with another person with just a great name, Sean King from Légère Reeds.
Hey, how's it going, Sean?
Yeah, welcome back to the program. You know,
Thanks
it's so
for
funny
having me.
because a little while ago, I had Sean Osborne on the program, and I mistakenly said to him, I think you're the first guest with the name Sean spelled the right way on the program. But then I remembered that you're not Légère, you're Sean.
Mm-hmm.
So in your head, that's the Légère interview, but yeah, Sean King, you were on a while before him, so you've got two Seans on the program now, which is just perfect. So
Well, we'll get all three of us on one combined show at some point, and just make it really painfully difficult.
the Sean special. Sean, what do you think of?
And just just put it out there and wait for who speaks first and see what happens.
Yeah. I'm actually thinking of, speaking of strange episodes, I'm thinking of doing an episode with like ChatGPT about Clarinet somehow. I'm not really sure how I'll do it yet, but seeing what
Just
it thinks
ask,
about.
you know, best questions from the clarinet community. All that, just crowdsource a bunch of questions and ask it, and then just say whatever it gives you. See how accurate it is about a topic that is comparatively niche compared to a lot of the other ChatGPT kind of questions that you get. So it could be really interesting, and it could be absurdly delightful. It
could be bizarre too. I've had some weird things go on in there, but it's surprisingly helpful, and you know, it's surprisingly insightful too. I bet if I were to ask it, what is the future of reeds, it would come up with something about Légère. So speaking of the new innovations and things that you guys have going on there, let's dive right in. And can you tell me all about these brand new, there they are. I was going to hold them up, but mine are in my case at my studio. There we go. The new French cut reeds from Légère. So just a little bit of kind of background info for me on these, everyone. I had the chance to try, I think it was a prototype of these, and I remember when I did, I was like, wow, these are something really interesting. And I didn't really know what they were yet. You wouldn't give me any info. You were like, they're secret reeds. So I tried those. I was quite impressed. And then they showed up in the mail a few weeks later, or months, I guess, and I was really impressed. So tell me all about these and how you're getting them to play even better than reeds I already regarded as good. But also I'm finding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they're more consistent, I think, between the reeds. So yeah, tell me all about the new French cut reeds.
Absolutely. So this right here, this is the guy. This is the French cut, and it's our newest product. It's a new reed, and we make it for clarinet, for alto and tenor saxophone as well. And it's a reed that we kind of dialed in intentionally for players in classical genres. So for saxophone, you know, they have different needs than some of the like classical saxophone reeds have very, very specific needs, and really like chamber orchestral clarinetists have different needs as well from like soloists. But one of the questions that we heard a lot was, can you make a reed that's even darker in sound? You know, clarinetists and classical saxophonists really dive into how dark a sound can I get. You know, people looking at really closed mouthpieces and strong reeds to enhance the richness, the core of your sound, to sort of suppress almost the higher overtones of the instrument to make something that's rich, resonant, and dark, but without like an airiness or without any kind of edge. And that was really what we wanted to do. But the trick was, how do you do that and also maintain a reed that is responsive, just like the rest of the Légère products? And that was what the design team set out to do. And so that was really what we ended up getting. It was a dark centered tone with that high overtone suppression. The design of the reed is very different. You know, the European cut is known for being a little bit wider at the tip, it's a little bit thinner at the tip, and all of that's to enhance an easy response and kind of a brilliance and a color and a real resonance of sound. This reed, we took a lot of that material that's on the reed and moved it towards the center and built like this little spine. So the spine that exists on the European cut is pretty pronounced, and this one is even more so. You know, the original concept was sort of to push more and more into the center to sort of build up the core of the reed and enhance the core of the sound. And that's really what happened. And then the next step of that was, okay, well, now we want to kind of deliberately curtail the higher end response so that it really focuses on this darkness. And that ended up providing us with a really clear sound with a really strong center and a really, really great resonance. And it just was really, really interesting. The further trick, of course, is it's all tricks and it's all just different changes to the design, was, okay, now can we do that while maintaining a really thin tip so it's responsive? And the answer eventually was yes. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's all comes down to how much does the reed scoot down at the tip and where do you make it curve down at the hearts. And that was sort of what we went with. And a big part of this reed was getting players to test it. So we ran some of our beta testing, not just with folks like yourself, our valued endorsing artists, but also with players who may not have preferred the European cut. So really, it's a great opportunity for us to explore the needs of players who felt they weren't being met by the European cut. And if you didn't like the European cut, there's a pretty decent chance that you'll like the French cut. And the other thing too, and maybe one of the more interesting bits about this design, was one of the most common things we heard about the European cut was the tip is wide. To which the response is, yes, it is. We did that. That was on purpose. However, some players didn't like it as much. It was definitely a different thing than they may have been used to. The French cut profile and width is more in line with what we imagine when we think about a traditional cane reed. So this definitely has had some changes, but I got to tell you, it's been really positive, the feedback that we get. I mean, I think I recall an email from you when the reeds arrived to you that it only said something like, wow, this reed is great.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Right away.
That is high praise. So, and that's what we're looking for.
Well, it's funny. I sent out the newsletter yesterday saying that you'd be on, and a couple people replied. Let me read one of them here, if I still have it in my inbox. So someone named William just said, "Love these reeds," and there's 5 exclamation marks. So there's some enthusiasm there for you too.
5 is good. 5 is good.
Yeah, there might even be 6, but they're getting kind of crunchy in the 1, 2, 3. No, there's 5.
Okay. I mean, 6 might have been excessive. Like,
6.
We like the reeds, but let's not go crazy here. No.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it's been super exciting to see all these really positive bits of feedback from clarinetists all over, and from the saxophone community as well. And people are trying the tenor reed on bass clarinet. We've just been sending out some testers on that so far. I think it's a little inconclusive so far, but we just haven't had the feedback on it. We didn't really plan for it to work. If it does, that will be incredible. A lot of players do use the tenor saxophone reed on bass clarinet in general, so we'll see what happens. The proof is in what do you, the player, like, and if that works, that'll be fantastic.
That was one of my questions, though, Sean, was can we expect to see it fill out in the E-flat clarinet, the bass clarinet line? I would expect so, but do we have a time frame on that, or? Well,
we have had a lot of requests about that already. And while there hasn't been any firm discussion on the matter, I mean, the more people that write in to say, hey, this is something that we would really like, and from players who try out the French cut on B-flat and say, I love this, make it for E-flat. We're feedback driven as a company. The more people who will come to us and say, this was great, and I would like this for bass, for E-flat. Hey, the more people who said, I would like it for contra. You know what? We'll think about anything. We've done a lot of stuff over the years, and a lot of it is just driven by the feedback from our consumers, from players out there who have a lot of inside information as to what people want. If you want it, let me know. And that's going to be what helps us determine, well, what do we do next? We're not a company that has settled and sat down and rested on our laurels and said, okay, that's good enough. No, there's always something else going on. Our current secret projects are, well, they're secret, I can't tell you, but they are, they exist. There is something new that's always being worked on. Could this be something that comes up as well? Tell me you want it, and we'll make it. That's the question. Is there a demand? Is there feedback that says people would like this? We'll do it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the core of the company values, if I may. And for those watching or listening, remember that we did kind of a deep dive into the history of the company last time. I can't remember what episode it was. Maybe 85. That sticks in my mind, but that might be wrong. It was a while ago now, but we did kind of dive into the founding of it and where it came from and early designs, early uses, things like that. But I definitely think it has come a long way. I remember using them back in the day, like what was it, 2003 probably or 4 in marching band, and it was a new thing back then, and it was pretty cool. But you're right, you guys have really evolved. You've now got the labels. I don't know if they're like laser written on there or something.
Oh, yeah.
But there's no more stickers. The stickers drove people nuts, but you finally found a way to do that.
Absolutely.
And I used to just write on there with a pen, like this is a 3.25 or whatever.
I'll talk about that for a second if you like.
Yeah, sure.
Because that was a whole production. Because the sticker that came off was another one of those comments that we got a lot of. That it came off was, there just wasn't a better way with the technology that we had at the time to do it. So there was a great deal of time invested in to see, well, how do we do this? And the technology, I think I said this a number of times on the last interview, but I don't understand the technology, and that's okay. I don't have to. But someone out there does. And it involves like a separate coating of a certain area, and then something with a curing treatment, and then an ink on top of that that's also cured. Don't quote me on any of that because I really don't quite get it, but I know it's lasted a long time, it's durable, and it's not a sticker. One of the other comments, too, was getting it so that it was, a decimal instead of the fraction.
Yes. Okay, so it was like a written... So I noticed I have some older ones here.
Mm-hmm.
These are like the Légère. It's interesting because these ones that still has the sticker just for the size,
yes,
for the strength, I suppose. That to me almost didn't really solve the problem because it's like I know the brand.
Yeah.
I need to know the strength when there's 10 of them in my case, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then I noticed a couple years ago you guys started doing the label printed there too, and so this to me is just like that's perfect.
I mean I love that when we're talking about feedback driven design choices. That was absolutely one of them. Having the opportunity to change something so that it was more helpful to the people who use and love our products. That was what we were going for, and it made a big difference. People were very, very pleased. People were confused for a moment just because it looked different, and it looked very different. So we did get some people asking, is this counterfeit? Is this a fake Légère? This label is pretty different. Nope, that is correct. That is real. And it was a really nice change, and it's definitely, I don't know, it's got more information on it. It looks nicer, and yeah, we've been very, very pleased with the way that it's come about.
Well, it's interesting to me because you said, it's not your job to kind of know how it works, and I think that's an important thing for the players too. Like I was saying, it's not my job to worry about why it works. It'd be kind of like my iPhone. If it was always stressing me out about stuff, I'm trying to just film myself playing, but I can't make it work. That's kind of to me like people who are fussing with their reeds. It's like it's really preventing you from doing your craft, and I don't really understand why people are so insistent on they have to have this relationship with their reeds. Like I'd rather not. I have other stuff to do, and when I'm playing, I want to be enjoying what I'm doing and able to make the music without all this stuff in my way and spending 3 weeks humming to my reeds and singing them lullabies, and it's just too much work for me. I don't know how anyone's ever gotten into it.
I mean, people that to use a phrase, right? People like to know how the sausage is made. People really do like to know the process. And I mean, there's a lot of great information that we have on the internet about all the things that we can share about the process. The actual technical stuff is confusing and technical, and we don't really. It's tough to explore a lot of that. But when it comes to the playing aspect of it, how do you get the easiest playing experience and have it sound great, just like you want yourself to sound? If there's a way to do that, if it's a shortcut, it's a shortcut. But if it works, then that's perfect. If this is a shortcut to playing better, I like to play better, Yeah, but there's no shortcut to playing better except for practice. And it's certainly a great time saver to help one practice more, to have that opportunity.
My next question was going to be, and then Lee, I'll get to yours. I see you posted one in the chat there. Do you think, and I don't know if this is really the right question, but it's kind of what comes to mind. Like when I was younger in university, and we're talking like 2004, so Légère was pretty new, maybe only a couple of years, right? But I remember there was a real stigma about playing synthetic reeds, and but everyone was experimenting with it. It's kind of like Nickelback, no one's a fan, but the concerts are all full, right?
Absolutely.
So who are these people, right? But everyone was experimenting with it, like in their back rooms, and sometimes one would make it out onto a stage. Like I remember a specific time where I was playing, and I couldn't get any of my reeds to work that day, and I was like, I just got to grab this. I know it works, and like no one's gonna know. How will they know? Like I'm going out. I played it was great, and a few weeks later, I was at a concert. I was subbing with the local orchestra a fair bit, where my teacher was also playing, and after the one piece, I can't remember what it was, but I said, "Oh, it sounded great." He just turned his mouthpiece to me and was like, "Don't tell anyone." It's a synthetic reed. It's a Légère. But nowadays, like David Schifrin said exactly what you said when I had him on the podcast. Like, this lets me play more. And for students, I believe too, this lets them play more.
Absolutely.
Plus, with the reeds, less play more. So, do you think that stigma is kind of evolving or evaporating because of the professional using the product, like David Schifrin, Corrado Giuffretti, like? There's so many people that use and trust these now, and they sound fantastic.
It's definitely, it's being reduced. We still hear it. There's always going to be. It's not always going to be. I think that's not true. So there has been stigma for a long time. There will continue to be some for players who may not have tried it, or may have tried just the wrong thing and not liked it, or for those players who are of an older vintage, who tried, reeds that may have been inferior. There have been some brands that don't exist anymore that maybe did not play so great. I happened to get my hands on a couple, like really early synthetic reeds. I don't remember the brand, to be honest with you, but it was like totally white. It was from the 1940s, and I thought, well, you only live once, so I played it. In hopes that it didn't contain asbestos or anything. And, it didn't sound great because the technology of plastics and other synthetic materials was very new. Technology has moved a great deal, and when people put their mind to adapting technology for new purposes, things have been changing quickly, and things continue to change quickly with our company as well, trying to be as agile as we can to develop new things and to develop our development process. Technology is always going to change, and one does oneself no favors by not experimenting. It is ideal to continue to experiment, to try and find the things that work best for you. Why... If you won't try a synthetic reed, why would you try a mouthpiece that wasn't only hard rubber? There are other materials out there.
Totally.
Like a crystal. Like, did mouthpiece technology stop with hard rubber? No, it's still one of the materials that a lot of people use. But the new bassoon mouthpieces, there are a lot that are not made from like traditional hard rubber. There are like pine or Pomerico mouthpieces from crystal, and those have some very, very fine sounds. And there are some great, entry-level plastic mouthpieces for students that are different. So technology is always changing, and the development process is always changing as well. Stigma about these things is just a lack of experimentation. One has to try. One must try. And, we really owe it to ourselves to try and find what gets us the best sound as musicians. That's what we're looking for. And so if it all it takes is to try something new, why not?
Totally. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. And it's important to note that I'm not like bashing those who continue to use traditional reeds. I just, live and let live, right? We can both do what we want to do,
Yeah, I don't really think most people are anti anything.
I've met some.
Yeah? Oh.
I know some people who are just like, they're like militant against like, oh, you're still playing those things? My God, what's wrong with you?
But like... in reality, if you didn't tell them what you were using, how many of them could actually tell?
Yeah, it's like that meme. Like, how would they know?
it's we've done the tests. We've run our little sound challenge on our website. If you can hear the difference, it's impressive. The vast majority of people, we've run the numbers. The vast majority of people don't. They cannot.
So do you think it's to me, I think it's a feel thing. Like it feels different. It's a bit more buzzy. You've got to make sure there's some hints, I guess, that I would give to someone transitioning to a synthetic reed. Like you've got to make sure to wet it, even though it doesn't need to be wet. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is that it sticks then like a normal reed to the mouthpiece. And for me too, like I really don't like to use ligatures, which on cane actually I really would enjoy, like a full metal ligature with just like some rails or some kind of those little ones that have points on them and stuff. I find that those are letting it be too free. So I like to, for some reason on the Légère, and you can follow up with this if you want, but I like to have a more constrictive ligature that I normally wouldn't like with a cane reed. But so, for example, I'm using like a Ravner, I think it's a Versa, or other types of ligatures like that. People have great luck with Silverstein or Silverstein, whatever. But yeah, the traditional ones, like the metal ones I used to go for, just don't jive well, and I've now gotten actually rid of them all. So what are your thoughts on that? Like as far as maybe that's one reason that a lot of people coming from metal ligatures they're really used to, they put on the Légère, they don't wet it because they're told they don't have to. They only try it for 2 hours and they're like, I don't like it, and they get rid of it.
I mean, 2 hours is not really a lot of time if you think about it.
Not, people don't have much patience sometimes.
But it's a disservice to yourself to not. However, one of the things, is having the right setup that meshes well with it. Some mouthpieces, asymmetric mouthpieces sometimes tend to have a bit of difficulty with Légères because Légère reeds are ground perfectly flat. So if the mouthpiece isn't perfectly flat, some other things can go wrong. And there's differing opinions about that as well. I know some people are really into concavity versus a convex facing on a mouthpiece. And there are about as many opinions on that as there are grains of sand on the beach, unfortunately. But there are a lot of options out there. For ligatures, it's kind of the same thing. For a Légère reed, one of the biggest things that stops people right away is the fact that they get the wrong strength. And getting the wrong strength can be a bit of a downer. Unlike a cane reed, which will break in and soften and get nice and easy, if you're a little bit too strong in a Légère reed, it can be a little bit of a tough one. If it doesn't pair well with like your facing and your embouchure, that can be a challenge. I mean, but that's exactly why we have offered our exchange of strength program for almost probably 20 years or so, because if you can get the right Légère, boo, the light goes off and you get the right thing. However, rolling back to ligatures, and I'm glad you brought this up, and this was unplanned. One of the things about the Légère reed and why some ligatures, especially some of those ones that are metal, don't quite work as well as they might is because the Légère reed is thin. The European cut reed, for example, is thinner than a cane reed. Now, the French cut, on the other hand, it is.
Here we go, drum roll, please.
It is thicker. The hearts and the bark area, all of that is thicker. So some of the ligatures that might not have worked because the metal just isn't formed to the size of the mouthpiece and the reed, many of them have been working. There are a couple that are still a little bit not quite, but a great deal more of them will work on a Légère. So some of them you had to like really tighten them up to make sure that they tightened and held the reed properly. Like the Van Doren Optimum, for example, tend to have to be a little bit clamped down. With the French cut, that's not quite the same. It's different. The Van Doren Masters is still with the big U opening on the bottom of it. I haven't tried it yet, so I can't really confirm or deny, but that was one that, because a lot of people love that ligature. So because the European cut was a little bit thin for it, it didn't quite work out. However, this French cut has alleviated some of those concerns, I would say. You know?
That's interesting. So that explains why I would feel I was losing controls, because the reed wasn't even properly secured, I don't think, by those other ones. Potentially.
It's a distinct possibility that, like, unless you were really reefing on it to close it up, there would be concerns. And that's why a lot of people with Légères preferred something with a little bit more flexibility, like some of the Rovner ligatures, like the Versa, or the Platinum, or just the standard Dark, which is, you know, a standard for a reason. It's a great ligature. And the Silversteins as well, for example, because there was more flexibility in exactly how much you could clamp it down. And the flexibility in the shape, big part of it, is being able to conform to the unique shape of the thinner reed. However, like I'm saying, French cut now is alleviating some of those problems. That was sort of an unintentional side effect. That wasn't really something that was on the table when it came to the design. The thickness of the reed was really to enhance the core of the sound. You know, that was by far one of the most important design decisions. That it fixes that problem is a handy-dandy bonus.
Lee's question, it was, how do the strengths compare to the European signature? So, like, if you're used to using a 3.25, can you still use that strength, or should you try a different strength?
Okay, so that's a fantastic question, and by far, since the launch of the French cut reed on December 1st, one of the most common questions that I've received. And really, players have been either staying the same, moving up 1 quarter strength. Some players have been finding it softer in comparison, but it does kind of just come down to what's your mouthpiece pairing. You know, players on more open mouthpieces have tended to stay with the same strength. Players with more closed mouthpieces have tended to go up a quarter strength. In rare circumstances, some players who felt that their number on the European cut was just a hair soft, some of them have gone up a quarter strength to the French cut and even tried another quarter strength up. But again, we actually don't have a lot of data just yet on what every player is preferring. And of course, it does come down to, well, what's your setup? What is your mouthpiece? What is the tip opening? Because that's all going to make a difference in how you perceive the strength. So that's sort of what we're finding. So, I mean, to sum it up, I would say the strength that you're playing on a European cut, or maybe a quarter strength up. Maybe.
Do you want to go into that a little bit about the mouthpieces, what you mean as far as the opening and how that might affect which strength you choose?
Yeah, absolutely. Generally, players, and this is kind of like one of those conventional wisdom things in mouthpieces, not just for clarinets, for all clarinets, but for saxophones as well, that players who play on a closed mouthpiece tend to prefer harder reeds. That's just sort of one of those conventional wisdom bits. Now, players who prefer more open mouthpieces tend to go a little bit softer. And there's, endless variation in this. Some players don't do that. A player on saxophone, like George Garzone, for example, he's using this 9-tip, 10-tip opening and a 4 or 5 strength reed on it. And he sounds fantastic. He sounds incredible. But that goes against what the conventional wisdom is. However, he's doing it and he's making it work and sounds great. So every outlier is an outlier for a reason. It's because it works for somebody. However, the general consensus is that for certain smaller tip mouthpieces, yeah, we like to go a little bit softer, and we find playing stronger, forgive me, they find the stronger reeds on a closed tip mouthpiece more comfortable. There's less likely you're going to overblow. There's less likelihood that the reed's going to close down. Like if you play a soft reed on a closed mouthpiece, the reed has a strong chance of closing down just because the reed is vibrating too much and closes against the tip of the mouthpiece. So that's one of the reasons why that sort of works out that way. And players who like closed mouthpieces prefer these strong reeds because the sound that they're getting out of that is rich, and they have a great deal of control with it as well. And you get a little bit more control with a stronger reed because you have to focus your airstream and focus your embouchure a little bit more, and then the sound changes as well.
Totally.
The ultimate answer, unfortunately, though, is you have to find what works best for you. And nobody likes to hear that there isn't one good answer for this. And that's the unfortunate reality, because everyone's oral cavity, this whole situation is different. And so some players really, really prefer something different. I know a fantastic player, a classical alto player down in Texas, who uses a closed mouthpiece and a reed that's far softer than what one might expect. Like a 2.75 playing classical stuff. And that is considered soft with a closed, like a Van Doren AL3 Optimum or something like that, like a closed C-star style mouthpiece. Or like a B44 clarinet. That would be considered a soft pairing for that closed of a mouthpiece. But this guy sounds great. That's his situation. Again, you do yourself a great favor by trying as much as you can to find out what works best. That being said, the conventional wisdom is the conventional reason for a reason, because it works for the greater number of people. So that's something to think about as well.
It's funny because so many people, though, they'll say like, "Oh, well, that's what Corrado Giuffredo uses. It must be good enough for me." But he's not you.
Yeah.
Like you really need to. That's so hard for, especially students who don't really sometimes have an artistic vision of what they want to sound like, or they're not sure what part of their setup is to blame for whatever problem's happening. But the stuff you said about the reed pinching shot, like I've demonstrated that before to students. I'm like, look, if you don't have enough mouthpiece in your mouth, when you close that reed, or when you put any pressure at all on that reed to form your embouchure, it's closed. So if you look there, where's your air supposed to go?
The reed shuts down.
How's that going to go? Yeah. I don't know if anyone can see that, but yeah, you can see the reed sticks off a fair bit. So I actually prefer the Schifrin one. That's the one that's in my case, because I like a more closed, it seems, these days. A few years ago, I was kind of more leaning towards open, but this one's maybe too open, I guess is what I'm saying for me. But the other one's a kind of a good point. But yeah, I find that I'm using about the same strength. I mean, I was kind of about a 3.5, maybe 3.75 sometimes with the Europeans. But Lee, to kind of continue the question, like now I'm using about the same. Like,
isn't it incredible that
ones, I would say,
over the course of your playing, and even now, like, not just as we're all students in some way, but even now as you've continued and you've practiced and you've grown, your setup is changing. Your setup's, even there's a great YouTube clip on the mouthpieces of Robert Marcellus that Ron Aldrich put out. And it's an incredible watch. And he's just such a wealth and a treasure of information. And, Marcellus was always trying new stuff. And he had a massive collection of things, because there's always a need to try something different and experiment. And even when you're at the top of your game, you owe it to yourself to continue to explore further.
Well, and they say a true artist as well will sound like themselves on basically whatever you give them, right? Maybe aside from like a Costco clarinet, but but even then, you'd be surprised. You could probably get 80% of your sound out of an instrument that's just almost a piece of garbage. You pick it up at a garage sale, and it's not like you're suddenly going to be a terrible player just because you're holding a $50 clarinet.
Absolutely, right? Some things don't change. Your embouchure, your airflow, the support that you provide, and also all of the years of practice and technical know-how that you have, that doesn't change.
Are these reeds and the whole process and the whole company, is it still all Canadian made, or are they? Yeah,
yep.
okay.
There's
great.
no
That's really cool.
Okay, well, so there is a little bit of the outsourcing for the cases. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
This is not made in Canada. Everything else is. Even the boxes. The boxes are printed in Canada, and
wow,
it's pretty great. It's great to be a Canadian company and to be a Canadian working in the industry, because there aren't that many Canadian musical instrument manufacturers. You know, amazingly, I think you've got most of the Canadian woodwind scene on this very interview right now. Representing bassoon, representing Légère.
A couple more people. And
There's not that much, but yeah, it's still based in a town called Barrie, Ontario, and that is where everything is made. All of our accounting gets done, all of our other stuff, like the admin-y things, and all of our sales and marketing is run through Toronto, our little office in Toronto. People are welcome, actually, to come visit us in our Toronto studio. If you're in Toronto, if you really want to try some reeds, you can do it. It's just, people come down, we'll try out some reeds. We have everything available to try. We're happy to receive people. It's on our website. You can visit and book some studio time with us. The downside...
Next time I'm out that way, I'll definitely go there.
The downside is you have to hang out with me. So I apologize in advance, but there you go. Yeah.
It's an upside. You bring the cat.
Yeah, I'm sure he would love that.
So I have two questions kind of left that I really wanted to ask. Then I'll ask you if you have anything else, I guess, to sort of share about it that I wouldn't really think of. But this one is kind of not sure how to ask it, but there's more competition now, right? So I've seen one come up from Van Doren recently. I can't remember what it's called. VK1. I haven't tried it yet because I don't think they're available in Canada or whatever. And I don't know. I haven't heard of it. Tried it. I don't actually know anyone who's tried it either. But really. But what makes Légère different, special, even now?
Well, I mean, when it comes to the synthetic reeds that have been made and are still in existence, Légère is one of the longest-lasting companies. We've been doing this a very long time. And there is a great deal of different know-how that comes with working with our material and working with synthetic materials in general. We've been doing this a while. We've had a lot of opportunity to build up a great system for development, a great system for manufacturing, and a lot of really wonderful and loyal players and customers around the world. And that doesn't come up overnight. When new things come up, it is, a lot of people try new things, and it's worth doing. But Légère as a company has been doing this for a while, and yet continues to work on it and continues to develop it. So when it comes to synthetic reeds, we kind of are the established, leaders. Yeah, that's a great word. So that's sort of where that is right now. Where these other new offerings are coming from, currently there's not that much info about, what is the VK1 made of. We don't know. So it's hard to say for sure. Similarly with the other from D'Addario, there's not a lot of information out about there, and certainly it's an exciting time to be in the market because there's a lot of new competition, and competition breeds really exciting new developments and new benefits for players out there who get to reap the rewards of us trying to outdo each other and to keep working to make the best product out there. And I think that's a really exciting time for the players out there as well.
Totally.
You're right. It's I haven't seen the VK1 out in Canada, so I can't really comment on it either, unfortunately. Looks cool.
Yeah, there's a few now. I mean, I don't know if Silverstein still makes one. I forgot about the D'Addario one. I'm not sure it's still made either. I'll have to check that.
Well,
but it does seem that I don't really know many people that I've heard of anyway that have been switching to those and then sticking. But when they go to Légère, they kind of do, though. That's what's weird.
I mean, there's a lot of benefits that we offer that, just as a result of being an established brand in the sphere. Just, being able to offer things like the exchange program, being able to offer a really, really unparalleled consistency of our products from reed to reed, being offering the kind of availability that we do, and the kind of, maybe say, the customer service that we have. For those who don't know, I manage the Légère customer service, so that was a blatant self-promotion. Yeah. But beyond that, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's, like I say, it's an exciting time to be a part of it, to keep offering new things and to see what the world has to develop. It's really, really exciting to be in this community that continues to develop. And, the clarinet community continues to develop all the time, too, to see how our reeds pair with some new mouthpiece offerings, to see what new mouthpieces are being offered and how they work, and to work with our valued artists to see what new pairings exist. With the new French cut, we've seen all sorts of new information come in about what mouthpieces have been really, really great and what sort of, might not be working. What's fascinating, Sean, I have to tell you, is that we had a client come into the studio. He came in and he was with the Schifrin mouthpiece. And he, tried the French cut, and he preferred the European cut at the end. But I'm hearing from you the opposite. It really goes to show it's so different what a player can like and what different their individualism will lead to. And it's a fascinating world to be in. And yeah.
Well, that's why it's nice to have the choice. I mean, there's several different kind of options now. But that, I guess, was my sort of last question is, let's say that you've never somehow at this point played Légère or any synthetic reed, right? And we're talking about this one's a bit warmer, that one's a bit wider and whatever. And there's also the classic series, and there's like 3 or 4 series now, right? So if I was just coming into this cold, like, what would you suggest that I do? Do I order 3 strengths of each? Do I order a selection of different strengths of different types, or should I hone in on one? Or like, what would you advise, kind of?
I would, at this point, it's, I think I would advise to try the European cut and the French cut, to see which one of those is producing the sound that you like, and then dive deeper into the strength that works. We have a strength chart that you can use to kind of find the thing that works in comparison to your preferred cane brand of choice, and then go from there. You can also just reach out to us, and we're happy to give you recommendations for what you should try based on what you're playing now. Between the French cut and the European cuts, that's generally where we would start a player off at, and picking the strength that is comparable to their current cane offering. That's ballpark the best place to start. And we're fortunate, our exchange program says, hi, you can just use our exchanges and find the one by dialing it in and getting the right strength that you need. We send a few reeds there and back, and we sort it out. It's not a demanding process, and it's absolutely worthwhile.
How does that work then? So if I buy a reed, like, it's about $40, I think it's Canadian, not sure what it is US. But so if I were to buy, let's say, 3, I find I really like the strength 3.25, I could return the other 2 and you'd send out 2 new ones, or how does that?
So it's an exchange. So whatever you have bought, you're allowed to fill out our exchange form at www.legere.com/exchanges and fill out the request to swap a reed for a different reed. If you bought, say, for example, a 3, a 3 1/4, and a 3 1/2, you land on the 3 1/4, Now you have this 3 and this 3.5. Submit some forms, when we can send you 3.25. Simple.
I kind of like having a spread. That's kind of what I advise people to do. I'm like, well, I mean, look in your reed case, and if you're using a 4, I bet you have a couple of 3.5s in there for days that you're, the weather's a bit different, or you're feeling tired or different or whatever. A lot of people have a couple different reed strengths. They don't realize it, but they often do. So I kind of think you got to do that for Légère too. And for me, like if people are looking for kind of my advice, I suppose, I mean, I'm in a obviously privileged position being a Légère artist, but even before that, you have to make an investment. Like I would buy 6 or 8 of them. And if this is your career and you're going to use those for 2 reeds and you don't have to buy cane reeds anymore, it's actually not more expensive. It's just different. But I've always liked to have a spread. Like as I was saying, these are definitely my older ones. These would have been maybe these are getting too old. I maybe have a problem collecting reeds.
Easy to do. Easy to do.
But, I know, right? But I've got between 3.25 all the way up to 4.25. And just a couple of each, just for different mouthpieces, different uses. Maybe I'm tired one day. Maybe you never know. So I don't think it's good to say for most people. Maybe I'm wrong, but like I'm always a 3.25. Like you got to have a little bit of options to kind of go with sometimes. I think that's the right thing to do.
You're totally right. It is a bit of a cost situation, but it's the same cost that if you were to buy a box of a cane reed. And also buy a box of the strength up and the strength down. It's a cost one way or the other, and that is an unfortunate reality that all of these things do have a bit of cost associated with them. We will just do...
Oh, and the hidden savings is things like this. Reed clippers, reed adjusters, reed everything that you just end up collecting, and, all these magic tools and things.
We've all got so many... It's so easy to start collecting all the bits and pieces. But the converse to that is it's a great deal of fun. Right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with like a little bit of a collection and going through and finding the things that work best for you and enjoying it. I don't know about you, but I've got more than a few clarinet mouthpieces. I play saxophone as well, so I've got more than a few saxophone mouthpieces as well. And that's just part of the collection. And what mood am I going for? What sound am I today? You said it earlier. I'm always going to sound like myself, but it does depend on what additionally we're trying to do. So my classical setup is different than my jazz setup, but I still do sound like Sean, for better or worse.
Totally. And I tell that to people too, and I'm not really teaching anymore, but when I was, it's like, well, look, I mean, you're 80% of the sound, and then your gear and everything else is the extra kind of 20%, let's say. And does it make sense for you as a beginner clarinetist, let's say, to buy a $1,400 ligature or mouthpiece or whatever, something that's, there's some crazy stuff out there, right? I mean, maybe not. Maybe you'd be better to spend $100 on a ligature and then $1,100 on lessons or whatever to get better. Get more information, more knowledge, more experience, whatever. But for someone whose job it is to do this day in, day out, like maybe that extra 2% better that it somehow is, maybe that is worth it to them.
Absolutely.
Right? So you got to kind of take stock of that too. I mean, who are these products really for? I mean, I'm shopping for some microphones right now to mic my wife's piano. She wants to record some stuff. And it's like, well, I mean, I could spend $40 on a microphone, or I could spend like $5,000. I have to find a middle ground that makes sense for me, right? Because no, we're not about to be, I want it to sound good, but I don't need it to sound like Abbey Road or whatever. Like it's, there must be some kind of
there's
in between. There's
always a middle ground, and it's sort of like there's a lot of great products out there, and there is a great deal of spread in terms of what they call the beginner and then intermediate and advanced and professional and all these things. But really it's a matter of you kind of find what works best and experiment within what your means allow and what you're looking to do. Exactly.
I think you said it best. It's an amazing time to be alive. There's so much choice. There's so much technology to choose from, and at a lower cost than ever before. Like the technology you can get for recording gear or instruments and stuff, like some of it might seem sort of expensive, but remember that if a really high quality audio interface, let's say, is $500, that used to be like an entire room full of gear. That was like $100,000. I mean, so it's remarkable.
The rise of content creation and influencing stuff has made it so you can get yourself out there and you can do it on a budget, and then you can also improve the stuff that you have to improve the quality of what you're doing. And, you know, it's absolutely wonderful to have so much selection and so much option. As a gearhead, you know, I love talking about all of the bits and pieces, probably more than I should. And, you know, that's what I really enjoy thinking about, is all the gear that exists that we have. And the vast selection is incredible. I think I spoke with someone about baritone saxophone harnesses once for about 10 minutes on a different context. And, you know, it was just it was a great time. But there's so many out there. If you can believe it or not, there's at least 6 or 7 different options for harnesses for baritone saxophone. Seems like a lot.
Wow.
And yet, you know, I'm glad she
Different
and the player found the one she was looking for, and it was it made all the difference. And that's a really interesting point, that it made all the difference to her playing to find the right product that worked for her. Whether it's a reed, a mouthpiece, a ligature, bells, barrels, instruments, there is, you know, a product out there that it's likely to be able to help, but it's also, you know, 80-20 comes down to you. How much time you put in, how much you want to get out of it, you know? We're lucky that we, you know, have all these choices, and it's such a fantastic time to experience all these things that all of these companies have to offer, you know? I'm sure definitely going to get my hands on whatever synthetic reed comes out from any other company, because I want to see what they're like. That sounds fun. Yeah,
try it
that's
out.
fun. So I'm looking forward to it. Yeah,
some blind testing. So the last thing, and I've seen some stuff, I don't remember where I saw this online, but people were being critical of this reed case that you guys have from an environmental perspective. And I think that there's something lacking there in their understanding, because I just want to go into this for a minute, like the environmental impact of like this kind of thing versus cane reeds or whatever. And not like from a political standpoint, but just like a reality. Like what's the reality of this situation, you know? Because my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that these reeds, they used to ship in that cardboard, and people used to complain there was no case for them to hold them, right? And then the problem with the cardboard was you guys had to ship them with more packing, right? So, but now with this recyclable external case, which some people say is too large, but remember that goes for all the reeds that you guys sell, right? But this is recyclable too. So, like, pretty much everything is recyclable, including the product. So, from an environmental perspective, where do these sit against cane reeds, which are often, you know, sprayed with pesticides and you know, we really don't want to admit it, but I think that more clarinetists have been exposed to pesticides from that than we want to admit. They're also food grade plastic, is my understanding. So yeah, like health-wise, environmental wise, like, is there something you can say about that without kind of delving into, I don't know, health? You know,
we're not doctors at all.
So.
No. Even a doctor of music is not the right doctor in this situation, and I'm not even that.
Wait a minute, what? No,
get your medical advice elsewhere.
All doctors aren't the same.
I know, right?
I've been misled.
They say, when you're on the airplane, they say, "Hey, is there any doctor on the plane?"
I'm a doctor.
Yes, clarinet. Like, ooh, yeah, it's not going to help. Yeah. So,
sit down.
You've touched on one of the really significant and salient points about the reed case, and yes, there's been some. I've heard some criticism that it's quite large. It does fit every reed that we make, including the double reeds. And that's useful, because if we only have to order one product, we have to make fewer things. And that's that's a win. In terms of logistically, in terms of manufacturing, and in terms of like the overall production required. The other thing, or another thing, is our retailers used to have to ship. If they were to send a Légère reed to a customer, a reed would have to go into a box that was padded, because there wasn't a lot of support in the old boxes, and a reed could bend. And unfortunately, if a Légère reed bends, it's not really that useful anymore. And you can't really flatten it out either. Again, that is just a unfortunate problem. But this case allows for a reed to be shipped inside a bubble mailer, and that has reduced the impact that shipping is, which is incredible. One of the biggest carbon footprints that exists in pretty much all manufacturing is logistics, getting something from A to B. And if you can use less space, that's a big, big savings for the environment, for the carbon footprint that you have. That's really, really significant. That was a really, really big concern. And especially, too, because if a reed arrived at a customer bent, we'd replace it. That was just part of our deal, right? And if that happened, we'd have to send something twice in another box. And that really does stack up. That adds up a lot in terms of the carbon footprint, in terms of what does it actually cost environment-wise for something to ship FedEx from Canada to, say, Australia. That's a lot. That's not a small chunk of carbon footprint usage. So this has really been a boon for that.
Oh, Lee says, I really like my European, and really is capitalized. I really like my European 3.5 and 3.75, but I'm really looking forward to the new French cut. Thank you, Sean and Sean.
Yeah, it's great. And thank you, Lee, for the question. And thank you, Sean, for having me on. It's always a pleasure. It's always great to chat, and to talk clarinet stuff. It's always something I enjoy doing. And it's a pleasure.
The Clarineat podcast is brought to you in part by one of my favorite products ever, Boveda two-way humidity control packs. I live in a super dry and cold climate in Canada, and so taking care of my instruments is a real challenge. However, it's effortless with Boveda. Every 3 months, I just replace the Boveda pack in my case, and I know my clarinets will be comfy and cozy inside. If you use cane reeds, there's also a mini version that fits inside most reed cases and keeps your reeds at their best, so they're ready to play when you are. Check out Boveda's offerings for clarinetists at bovedainc.com and use code Clarineat at checkout to save 10% on your next purchase. Click the link in the description below to learn more.